Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 122 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. Although it's only the middle of June, by the time next episode comes out, it will be July already, so it's time for me to shout out my patrons. If you'd like to join in, it's just $1 per month to get full scripts of the shows and audio outtakes in addition to this monthly thank you, which this month goes to Justin Bailey, Lily Breen, Jesse Clark, Ricky Garvin, Rob Garrison, Aaron Woodward, Aaron Borst, Carla Hoffman, Lyndon Onstead, Happy Father's Day, Julio Herrera, Matthew Saint, and Utuk Zul. Your support every month helps keep me going on this podcast, and I'm truly grateful. Thank you so much. Now, on to the show. Last episode, I was asked by Scott Parker about colors in the DC universe and their connection to certain characters. Specifically, he called out green for plant-based and red for animal-based powers. In addition to those color connections that I discussed 2 weeks ago, DC has another rainbow of characters, with each color being linked to a certain disposition. It's time to talk about the emotional spectrum and the various Lantern Corps. Instead of going in rainbow order, we're actually going to start in the middle, as the two most well-known of these groups are from the center of the spectrum. The very first group we met were the Green Lantern Corps, through their newest recruit, Hal Jordan, back in Showcase number 22, released in September of 1959 by John Broome and Gil Kane. This is the Silver Age Green Lantern. There was a Golden Age Green Lantern, Alan Scott, with similar powers, but his origin was very different, and it wasn't until many years later that Alan's power source was retconned to be related to the power source of Hal. That power source is the Power Battery, a green device that looks similar to an old-fashioned lantern and recharges the ring Hal wears, which allows him to create various constructs made out of a green energy. In the original version of the story, it was Hal himself who decided on the name Green Lantern based on the shape of the battery. But in later versions, like the post-crisis Emerald Dawn by Christopher Priest, still going by James Owsley at the time, and Mark M.D. Bright, all of the beings who are granted these powerful devices go by the Green Lantern name. As the Green Lantern history has been expanded, we've learned that the known universe has been split into 3,600 sectors, each of which is assigned 2 Green Lanterns to patrol as a sort of police force, overseen by the Guardians, an immortal race living on Oa. Earth is in section 2814, in case you're wondering. One important factor about Green Lantern's ring that he was told in the first version of his origin, but in later versions became something he had to discover the hard way, is the yellow impurity, which prevents the ring's energy from affecting anything colored yellow, which led to many Silver Age shenanigans, with various objects being painted yellow for no apparent reason except to give Hal an obstacle to overcome. The other thing we are told in the Showcase version of Hal's origin is that Hal was chosen because he was A, fearless, and B, honest. These were apparently the 2 qualifications for the position. Now we need to move forward many years, when in the 90s, Hal Jordan apparently went insane, went to Oa, and entered and absorbed the central power battery, which is what gave each of the individual Lanterns' batteries their power. Along the way, he killed multiple Green Lanterns, with others dying as a result of their power source being drained away with no warning. The destruction on Oa also killed all but one of the Guardians, named Ganthet. This new version of Hal referred to himself as Parallax, and was a villain in the DC universe for a time. Ganthet, in the meantime, was able to create one last ring, and bestowed it on struggling artist Kyle Rayner. This ring did not need to be recharged, nor did it have the yellow impurity, making it even more powerful than the original version worn by Hal and the rest of the Green Lantern Corps. Although in Showcase, we were told that the reason for the yellow impurity had something to do with the exotic metal used to create the Green Lantern batteries, this was retconned by writer Jeff Johns, later DC's chief creative officer, and still highly involved in many of DC's movies and TV projects, despite no longer being an official employee. In the story Green Lantern Rebirth, we find out that the Guardians had trapped a parasitic force that was the living embodiment of fear in the power battery, a large alien creature of yellow energy known as Parallax. And it was that creature who caused the yellow impurity, and was also the reason that one of the requirements of being a Green Lantern was to be fearless. Unfortunately, Hal Jordan was slowly infected and then possessed by the fear entity after the destruction of his hometown of Coast City, an event that took place during the Return of Superman storyline. This retcon is what allowed Johns to bring Hal back as a hero after years of being a villain, then anti-hero as the new host for the Spectre, putting the blame on his actions as Parallax on the fear entity rather than Hal himself. This was also the first introduction of yellow being associated with fear in the DC universe, and was quickly expanded on by Johns and the other creators on the Green Lantern titles. One of Green Lantern's recurring villains from the Silver Age on was Sinestro, a former Green Lantern who had been given a yellow power ring that originated in the antimatter universe called Quard. Soon after the Rebirth story, Sinestro founded his own corps of yellow lanterns. Whereas the Green Lantern's rings constructs are shaped by the user's willpower, the Yellow Lantern rings are able to manifest constructs using their own fear, which they are able to overcome in order to instill fear into others. Sinestro orders his corps to go to war against the Green Lanterns, all to serve his greater purpose of instilling order onto the universe. However, this war of fear versus willpower opens the door to other forces manifesting the powers of various emotions into colorful displays of energy, as we see in a prophecy laid out in Green Lantern, Volume 4, number 25. As we're introduced to these new lanterns, we discover that the ones at the beginning of the rainbow tend to be what we would consider to be more negative emotions, while the ones at the other end are more positive, but that on both ends of the spectrum, as you get farther away from the center, the less sense of self the ring bearers keep. While all the various lanterns have some similar abilities, including flight and an aura of protection, the other abilities vary from corps to corps. Moving into Rainbow Order, we start with the Red Lanterns. Ruled by Atrocitus for most of their history, the Red Lanterns are powered by rage. Very few of the Red Lanterns are able to keep their intelligence, being reduced to a primal state by the overwhelming anger. Only Atrocitus himself and a few chosen members, after undergoing a shamanistic ritual, are able to act of their own accord, while most are nearly mindless slaves of the Corps' leader. Instead of the constructs that the Yellow and Green Lanterns create, Red Lanterns simply spew a red plasma-like energy from their mouths as an offensive weapon, although Atrocitus can also create constructs when he wants. In addition to this ability, Red Lanterns can also corrupt the energies of the other Lantern Corps, preventing them from fully functioning. Next up are the Orange Lanterns, although it's most often more accurate to say the Orange Lantern. This force is powered by avarice, or greed, and as such, the most greedy of the Orange Lanterns killed every other member of his corps in order to keep all the power to himself. His name is Larfleeze, and the constructs he creates take the shape of his various victims, each of which is also capable of draining power from other power rings. Being the solo Orange Lantern, Larfleeze carries the main power battery of the entire corps with him, rather than it being stationed on a planet like the others. This close proximity allows him to create an entire corps worth of constructs and use them as if an entire Orange Lantern Corps did exist. Skipping over yellow and green, since we've touched on those already, we get to the Blue Lantern Corps, which use hope as their emotional source of power. By themselves, Blue Lanterns are able to create constructs similar to the other rings on the middle section of the spectrum. But their true power is unleashed when they are in close proximity to a Green Lantern, as their corps was created by Ganthet and Sade, former Guardians who wanted to help the Green Lanterns in their own way. A Blue Lantern is able to overcharge a Green Lantern's ring to 200% of its normal capacity. In addition, when close to a Green Lantern, a Blue Lantern's ring can heal wounds and stop the corrupting power of the Red Lanterns and the draining abilities of the Orange rings. Although Blue Lanterns and Green Lanterns work well together, it's impossible for a Green Lantern to visit the home of the Blue Central Power Battery, as being that close will cause the Green Lantern's ring to overcharge to the point of implosion, taking the wielder's hand in the process. Next up on the emotional spectrum is Indigo. Rather than being referred to as a corps, the wielders of this light, powered by compassion, are known as the Indigo Tribe. Instead of a lantern-shaped power battery, each Indigo tribesman carries a staff that powers their ring. Being as empathetic as they are, Indigo Lanterns can emulate the ability of any other colored power ring that is close to them. The power emulation is so close to the original that the other ring wielders can use an Indigo tribesman as a sort of battery in an emergency to charge their ring, although the energy absorbed during this process is imperfect and doesn't give all of the abilities. For instance, Lantern Corps members using this emulated energy cannot use it to fly for some reason, although they can create constructs with it. Finally, members of the Indigo Tribe can use their rings to heal others with great empathy, while those who willingly inflict pain on others, the exact opposite of empathetic behavior, can experience that pain themselves as part of that same ability. The last of the Lantern Corps on the visible rainbow is one that, like Sinestro and his Yellow Lanterns, comes from a Silver Age concept that was retconned and expanded on in more recent stories. In October 1962's Green Lantern number 16, Carol Ferris, Hal's unrequited love, is possessed by an alien queen known as Star Sapphire from a race of women known as Zamorans, and given powers similar to the Green Lantern ring, but in a purple or violet hue instead, and tried to use her power to prove that women were superior to men. While Carol was freed from the Star Sapphire's influence in this first story, it would come back again and again to take Carol over throughout her history. Once Jeff Johns started introducing the various colors of Lantern Corps, the Zamorans were retconned into a subset of Owens, who split off from the Guardians when they decided to eschew all emotions. The former Owens found the Star Sapphire gem on the planet of Zamora and learned to harness its powers. The gem was originally used on its own to possess women like Carol. Then, in these more recent stories, although by recent I'm referring to issues that are 15 years old rather than 60 or so, The gem was fashioned into a violet power battery, and rings were created similar to those of all the other lanterns. In addition to the usual powers, these violet rings are able to encase prisoners captured in a crystal, which slowly converts those encased into new star sapphires. They also have the ability to bring someone recently killed back to life, if they can draw on the power of the person who most loves them. Also, like blue lanterns, violet lanterns' constructs are immune to the draining ability of the orange lanterns. Being on the far end of the spectrum, star sapphires tend to be single-minded. To be chosen as a star sapphire, you must either have lost your greatest love or have been loved and then spurned. Thus, these violet lanterns are so obsessed with protecting love that they end up missing the bigger picture. Star sapphires were originally portrayed as being an all-female corps, but that was done mostly as a nod to their history, and other genders have been shown to join the violet lanterns since then. One of my first thoughts when I read about the different colored corps being added to the DCU was along the lines of, well, it's a weird coincidence that the colors line up exactly to the colors that human eyes can see. And in Scott Snyder's run on Justice League, he actually added an ultraviolet corps, with former Green Lantern John Stewart and former Yellow Lantern Sinestro as members, and was said to be part of the invisible emotion spectrum. But that idea wasn't picked up on by any other writers and hasn't been seen again since that 2018 story. Given that they were powered by the emotion of self-loathing, I actually would have put that corps at the other end of the spectrum and called them the infrared corps, but maybe that's just me. There are two more corps to be discussed, and it probably won't surprise you too much to learn that they are the White Lanterns and the Black Lanterns. Unlike the corps based on actual colors, rather than all colors and the absence of color, the White and Black Lantern Corps are not powered by emotional states, but instead represent life and death, respectively. The Black Lanterns were led by a villain known as Black Hand, and consisted of intelligent zombies, many of whom had been superpowered in their original life, or had some connection to currently living superheroes in order to mess with their heads. The White Lanterns were mostly comprised of characters who had died and yet come back to life at some point. As you can imagine, this being comics, that was a decently sized list. Kyle Rayner, the only known person to master all 7 of the color-based rings, was also a White Lantern. These two corps were seen primarily in the Blackest Night storyline from 2009, with Black Hand and his corps being defeated by the temporarily created White Lantern Corps, all of whom went back to their original status quo after the storyline finished, with the exception of a few characters who were specifically resurrected during this arc, including Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, Maxwell Lord, and others, whose story continued in the 24-issue Brightest Day miniseries. Speaking of the Blackest Night story, near the end of that tale, some other characters not usually connected to the Green Lantern mythos were temporarily recruited into the various Lantern Corps to help fight the Black Lanterns. Mira, Aquaman's wife, received a red ring, an orange ring went to Lex Luthor, Scarecrow got a yellow ring, the Flash, Barry Allen, wore a blue ring, and an indigo staff was wielded by the Atom, Ray Palmer, while Wonder Woman got a violet ring. The Green Lantern ring from this set was worn by Ganthet, who is the one who duplicated the other rings to find appropriate hosts on Earth, as that was the site of the final battle. As I said, this was just for the finale of this storyline, but it's an interesting footnote to the long careers of these various characters. If you go back to episode 1 of Welcome to Geektown, you'll hear me mention that Green Lantern was one of the few books that was mostly unaffected by the New 52 reboot. And that's at least partially because Jeff Johns was still telling stories related to the concepts he had introduced just a few years earlier in this overarching War of Light story, which covers the Green Lantern stories from Green Lantern Rebirth to Blackest Night. And the book was popular enough to warrant basically continuing on as it was, despite the rest of the universe starting over from scratch. And these ideas have also gone on to be part of the Green Lantern movie and animated series, and other shows like the current animated show Young Justice, and even the most recent episode of Flash, as of this recording. Even though Jeff Johns is not involved in the day-to-day operations of DC, he's left a lasting impression on the universe with these colorful core and the emotional spectrum. Well, this was a longer episode than normal, but I think I needed the extra time to cover all the concepts involved. Hopefully you agree. Whether you did or not, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the show, or any questions you have that you'd like to hear as a topic for a future show. Please send any and all of those via email to welcometogeektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome to Geektown or Twitter @GeektownPodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcome to Geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Lovitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.